Wynd Kaufmyn grew up in the Jewish community in Detroit, Michigan. She graduated from UC Berkeley with a master's in ME in 1981 and started teaching at City College of San Francisco until her retirement in 2023. While teaching, she also dedicated herself to various social justice movements, including Nicaraguan solidarity, homeless person advocacy, defending public education, and defending human rights in Western Sahara. Wynd travels numerous times to the West Bank between 2002 and 2012, participating in Palestinian-led nonviolent demonstrations against the Israeli occupation. Wynd is waiting to board the flotilla to Gaza that will challenge the illegal Israeli siege of Gaza and bring humanitarian aid to a civilian population, half of which are children that are starving. So, Wynd, thank you so much for being with us. I got a question. Is that pier going to be there for you when you guys arrive, or do we need to send you some duct tape?
We do not want that pier that the U.S. built. Get rid of the pier.
Just checking. It was 200 and some million. If you need some
250,
duct tape, let us
250
know.
million. Yeah, waste. It was all a charade anyway from the get-go. In
Tell
fact,
us about that video for Julian.
yeah. So, something I just want to say, I love your points of love, and I love this idea that, people who really want to reject the violence of this world and the insanity can gather together and get some respite from it, because it's pretty hard. So, yeah, I mean, I look around the world, I look at this Gaza war, which is just the inevitable conclusion of what Israel was all about from the very beginning. But the time scale and the scope of the killing spree is so exponentially escalated that it's mind-boggling. And it's really hard to live in this world at this point, I think. And it just seems so hopeless. And I never expected Julian to be free. I thought he would die in jail, and I thought his death would probably not be too far away, given how he'd been treated, and his physical and psychological demise was just very worrisome. So when I found out he was freed, and by the way, there's by no means any justice has been done for Julian. I don't know if any of you read Caitlin Johnstone, but she did an amazing piece that talked about what justice would have looked like, and I'd suggest that you Google her and find out what it would have looked like, but it didn't look anything like that. He had to take a plea bargain. He was sentenced to time served. He was not vindicated in the eyes of the world, except of course he never needed to be vindicated in so many of our eyes, because he's a true hero. He's a true journalist that exposed the truth that we need to know if we're going to be in a democracy. So he's an amazingly admirable person that had been persecuted for just doing his job of journalism and telling the public what's really going on. And that's why he was punished so much. So anyway, I never expected him to get out. The fact that he did get out and he's still alive, he did serve 14 years in jail, and 7 of them were horrendous. But he got out. And for me, that was a little bit of light coming in, something I never expected. And, it's like sometimes on my dark days, I think, Palestine will never be free. Well, it will be, because Julian got out. So I was just kind of, contemplating that and just absorbing all of that I just talked about. And my friend Toby Blome, who organized for 20 years with Code Pink, said to me, I want to do a banner drop on the Golden Gate Bridge for Julian's birthday. And I just thought, I wasn't that excited about it. And then she told me why she wanted to do it. She didn't want to do it, as a political statement, to get him out or, because he'd already been out. And actually, by the way, I do think that Julian is free because of all of the activism around him. Anyway, she said that the reason she wanted to do it was to help him heal. And that moved me. And so I was like, yes, I'll do it with you. And we kind of, did this at the last minute. We both spent a lot of time working on the banner and putting everything else aside in our life for like the next 24, 48 hours. And thankfully, Peter helped us out enormously. And we did this banner drop, and it was beautiful. And I can only hope that when he sees it on this iconic bridge in San Francisco, he knows that people care about him. And for me, it was also very important to put that message there next to Happy Birthday, Julian, that he's free now and Palestine will be. So that's the story. I don't know. I can pause here and see if anybody wants to say anything or ask a
When I
question.
thought that, did you have a slideshow you wanted to share?
I do. I do.
Yeah,
And
the
I
only thing I want to thank you for doing that. Some
thank
people
you.
get Nobel nominations for uh, falsifying reasons to go to war, and others end up in jail for exposing the crimes of that war. This is
Exactly.
the world we live in, and
Yeah.
justice
Yeah.
is hard to find sometimes, and I know that personally. So, thank you, Winda. If you don't mind, share your screen.
Okay. Thank you. So there's so much I could talk about, and I even could be a comedian. I do solo performance, but I'll spare you that. And instead, I was thinking, another issue that's very close to my heart is Western Sahara. And not that many people know about Western Sahara. And so I thought, okay, great. This is my opportunity to maybe give some education to a little known situation in the world. So I have a little slideshow here. Let me start it. Uh, all right. So, and let me minimize this thing up here. Okay. Okay. So, I don't know, like, do any of you know much about what's going on in Western Sahara and the history of it? If you do, then forgive me. I hope I won't bore you too much, but I'll go through the history fairly quickly, and then I want to talk about a specific project that I worked on regarding the most amazingly inspirational woman that I've met in many years. Okay, so just real quick history. Spain colonized Western Sahara in 1884, and it was an area that was populated mostly by Berber tribes. In 1934, it actually becomes Spanish Sahara, which was a province of Spain. So it was a colony of Spain. And, it wasn't unlike most of Africa. In 1945, the status of the colonization of Africa is, as this map shows, the only regions that were independent are these regions in blue: Liberia, Egypt, Ethiopia, and South Africa. Um, and so in 1965, the UN called for the decolonization of all non-self-governing territories of the world. And so that actually started. Specifically, the situation in Western Sahara is that Spain was preparing to leave in 1974. And the year before that, the indigenous Sahrawi independence movement was founded. And it's called the Polisario Front. It's actually an acronym for something I cannot pronounce, so I'll just say the Polisario Front, but it refers to the geographics of the area. Anyway, when Spain was preparing to withdraw, there was to be a referendum put to the people to determine whether or not they wanted self-determination or if they wanted to remain a colony of Spain. But in 1974, Morocco and Mauritania, coveting the rich fish and phosphate resources of Western Sahara prevented the referendum by filing territorial claims at the International Court of Justice. But the International Court of Justice ruled that they had no legitimate claims in Western Sahara. So in 75, defying that ruling, both that ruling and UN proclamations, Morocco invaded Western Sahara. They actually called it the Green March. Sahrawis call it the Black March, and they came in with 350,000 tanks, troops, and settlers, and they began their occupation of Western Sahara. And as they begin their occupation, the Polisario begins its war for independence against Morocco. And by the way, the occupation was sanctioned and funded by the West. In 76, the Polisario declares the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, and it becomes a full member of the African Union. So they're trying to pave the way for full independence and sovereignty of their nation. They fought a war for 16 years, and during that time, Morocco built the second longest wall in the world after the Great Wall of China. So this is another wall that needs to fall. It's made mostly of barbed wire, dogs, a moat, and 150,000 soldiers. But really the significant thing about this wall is that it has 8 million landmines. It is the most densely landmined place on Earth. And it completely prevents anybody from crossing this wall. Morocco occupies the yellow part of this map. They call it the Southern Provinces. But anyway, it's Western Sahara. And then this eastern part of Western Sahara, this orange part, is actually controlled by the Polisario, but it's very, very, very sparsely populated. Most of the Sahrawi population lives in refugee camps in Algeria. In 1991, the UN brokered a ceasefire between the Polisario and Morocco. A critical element of it was the promise for a referendum. And in fact, MINURSO was established to implement that referendum. It's the UN mission for referendum in Western Sahara. But very quickly, with US backing, Morocco prevents the referendum, and they claim to annex Western Sahara. The occupation becomes brutal with egregious human rights abuses. And I want to point out that Morocco's occupation of Western Sahara, very similar to Israel's occupation of Palestine and Putin's invasion of Ukraine and claiming to annex territory there, are the three places in the world where you have the situation of, a sovereign nation trying to acquire territory by force, which is totally against all international law principles. Anyway, in this map, you see that in 2023, I should update it because now it's 2024, but regardless, this is all of the previous colonies in Africa, and they are now all independent except for Western Sahara. And so Western Sahara is called the last colony of Africa, and for this reason. In November 2020, after waiting 30 years for the referendum and enduring a brutal occupation, the Polisario resumed armed resistance. In December 2020, as Trump exited office, he made the unprecedented, at that time, unprecedented proclamation that recognized Morocco's sovereignty over Western Sahara. No other country had ever done that. It still is to this day by the United Nations considered a non-self-governing territory that should be given its independence. At the time, the US was the only world nation that did that. Despite Morocco's blatant human rights policies, Biden actually continued Trump's policy and continues it to this day. And unfortunately, other nations have followed. Okay, this slide talks about U.S. complicity in the original occupation of Morocco, and I'm not going to go into that, but we know that pretty much everything bad in the world is due to the U.S. Okay, that was a joke, but not far-fetched. Okay, so I want to pause here because that was basically the background and the context for the project that I want to talk about. And the project was involving the home of Sultana Khaya, who's a human rights defender, an advocate for cessation of sexual violence, and a non-violent activist for Sahrawi self-determination. So she's a very prominent activist with many awards given to her. And she was basically incarcerated extrajudicially in her home. She and her sister and her mother could not leave the home. They couldn't have guests. Her 80-year-old mother was allowed to go to the grocery store, and that's about it. And then periodically, soldiers would come in and rape her and her sister in front of the mother and torture her. And I can go on and on. They poisoned the water. It's just, they stripped the whole house of its furnishings. It was just this amazingly brutal situation. And despite that, they held rooftop protests every day. And here she is on one of them. She wrote a letter to Nonviolence International requesting intervention. And that's when the executive director of Nonviolence International, Michael Beer, basically convened a group of people, myself included, to break the siege of the Khaya household. And so we went in there as unarmed civilian protectors, and we were actually able to get in 4 of our volunteers. And here are 2 of them with Sultana and her sister and her mother. This was the day they actually made it into the home, which was 482 days after the initial incarceration. It was an almost 500-day siege that was broken. And believe me, it was broadcast throughout Western Sahara, throughout the refugee camps in Algeria. And apparently it was like an amazing celebration that everybody had, that this home had been, that these international volunteers had been able to get in and break the siege. They called it the House of Freedom. It was like the one place in Western Sahara that's free. Here are some pictures that they took after they entered, just showing the damage that had been done. They don't really do justice, but you can see the stains on the walls, which are, they don't even know what they're from, but our volunteers told us that the house smelled so bad that they couldn't understand how they could live there. The soldiers poisoned their water. The only access they had to the roof was this door, and so they welded it shut, and Sultana just broke open this hole so that she could continue doing her rooftop protests. This basically just says, anyway, the day that these volunteers came was just a day of celebration, and everybody came to the house. And there was food and music and stories to tell. And so here are some of the children that came. This boy was actually detained later and beat up just for visiting her house. Anyway, the daily rooftop protests continued. This is the milfa, which is a traditional dress for Sahrawi women. And they're very proud of it, actually. It's kind of a complicated way to fold just a very big rectangular piece of cloth. And it's very comfortable in the heat. The demands that we had was an end to the rapes, freedom of movement, and an independent international investigation of human rights abuses in Western Sahara. Well, the rapes ended because of our international presence. They still could not leave the house, but people were able to come and visit them. And we're still waiting for an international investigation into the human rights abuses. Anyway, these are just some of the press releases we sent during our volunteers' time. One day when they, after one of these rooftop protests where there had been a lot of the neighborhood women that joined them, all of the women were arrested and beaten. And so instead of the women being there, Sultana actually installed a flagpole. So there she is with a drill and cement, and she made flagpoles for each woman who couldn't be present. And then she put a flag in it. She said, "You can torture and beat and rape us and our land, but we persist." Anyway, so some more of the press releases. So anyway, that's my spiel. Sultana did eventually need to leave because we could not maintain the international presence in her house to protect her. So she left with the last group of volunteers, and she's in Spain now, still advocating for Western Sahara. All right, and my clock says that I've taken 19 minutes. So I finished in time. Wait, Vahid, you're mute.
Sorry about that. I've been known of many things. Mute is one of them now. uh, when I wanted to know what was the name of the nonprofit organization that you wanted folks to donate to?
Karama Sahara.
Okay.
So you can find it if you go to the website, just Karama Sahara. It rhymes with Sahara,
Okay.
karamasahara.org.
Are there any principles you want to add to the list that I shared that come to mind?
Um, I don't know if it's quite consistent with your list, but I have a list of 5 things that would make a better world.
Go with it. Let's hear it.
Not necessarily in this order.
Okay.
Everybody gets enough sleep. Everybody has to clean their own toilet. No inheritance. Campaign finance reform and free quality childcare.
I can agree with some of it, but not all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have a discussion later. I want to know what you don't which one you didn't like.
Be happy to. So I want to introduce the next speaker. By the way, I have never met anybody that's on our events, at least on today's event, in person at any occasion.
But
So
you live in the
even
Bay
though
Area, right?
I'm in the Bay Area,
Oh,
but
nice.
I've met Carl Blake, the Dr.
Okay.
Blake that was playing music, but that's the only person. Everybody else is brand new, and in terms of online.